Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Courtney Tedrick. I'm the head of community engagement at Wheaton Public Library. And before we get started, I'm going to launch a poll here just asking if you are watching with anyone at home, just so we can get an accurate stats count. So the library has been doing DEI, which is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion programming for the past several months in partnership with community organizations and members of the community, including the City of Wheaton Council member Erica Bray Parker, who worked with tonight's featured community leaders and student moderators to coordinate this program. So a huge thank you to her for her work and leadership in moving the City of Wheaton forward in regards to DEI initiatives. So be sure to check out our calendar on our website, the library's website, and the library's Facebook page for upcoming DEI programming. For tonight's program, our moderators will be asking questions of our panelists, but we will open it up for questions from the audience at the end if time allows. Please save your questions until the end and make sure to utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen so we can keep all the questions in one place. And also, if you do use the chat function, make sure to select all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, just the panelists and moderators will see it. And if we do not get to your question, please feel free to submit it to the Community Engagement Department at our email address. That's CE for Community Engagement at wheatonlibrary.org, and we will make sure the leaders receive them. So thank you to those who did submit questions ahead of time. We did try to combine and condense them with our questions to the panel tonight. So I'm so honored to introduce our first student moderator, Morayo Oladipo, who is a senior at Wheaton North High School, and you may recognize her as a past panelist on part 4 of our Talking About Race program series that focused on being anti-racist. Thank you so much for being here, Morayo. I'm going to hand it off to you now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Morayo. I'm a senior at Wheaton North High School. Outside of regular school, I'm a part of our school's track and field team, Molly Wen, and Black Student Alliance. Through BSA and some of the other opportunities at my school, I was able to have important discussions about diversity and inclusion, like the one that we're having here today. I'm pretty excited to be here, and with that, I'll pass it on to our next moderator, Maryam.
Hi everyone, my name is Maryam Tourk. I'm a senior at Wheaton North as well. And outside of Wheaton North, I'm involved in activities like Model United Nations, Interfaith Club, and a student initiative called High School Students United. Working on inclusion in and beyond our community has been something that's been really important to me all throughout high school. So I've been really honored to be a moderator here today, and I'm really excited for our discussion. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jonatan.
Hello, my name is Jonatan Reyes. I'm from Wheaton Warrenville South High School, and I'm a junior. And other activities that I do include, gymnastics. And I'm part of the Dean's Advisory Committee, and I am part of another group called Day One Leadership with the Principal. And yeah, that's some of the things I do. And next, I guess I'll say a question. Right, yeah. So, Mr. Dzugan, can you please introduce yourself and let us have a brief explanation of what you do for the city and for those of us who don't understand that?
Well, thank you, first of all, for allowing me to participate on a panel. I do think it's an important discussion. So again, thanks for having me. I am the city manager for the city. I've been with the city for almost 30 years, serving as assistant city manager and now as city manager. I guess the simplest description of what I do for the city is that I am the chief executive officer. And in that capacity, I carry out the policies that are set forth by the city council. The city council lays out the programs and services that they desire to see for the community, and I, leading the staff, implement those programs and services.
All right, thank you. Now I would like to introduce Mrs. Betsy Adamowski. Mrs. Adamowski, can you please also tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do as the library director?
Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be on this committee. Yes, I'm Betsy Adamowski. I'm the executive director of the Wheaton Public Library. I've been here since 2013. So not quite a decade, but I am getting there. But I have been a professional librarian for almost 30 plus years. So pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce our next panelist, Chief Murphy. Chief Murphy, can you tell us a little bit about your role as the police chief here in Wheaton?
Hi, my name is Bill Murphy. I am the chief of police here in Wheaton. I've had the absolute pleasure of serving the city for over 30 years. I've been chief for almost 3 years. As chief of police, I'm responsible overall for the police department and our response to both, community safety and community engagement. Certainly saw this as a great opportunity to interact with as many people as I can, and hopefully answer questions in an intelligent way, and hopefully dispel maybe some of the things that people don't know about the police department.
Asta, could you please explain to us what you do for the community, and I guess a little brief explanation of what you do.
I'm one of 11 people, great, passionate, intentional people with the Community Relations Commission. Our mission is to strive and be a catalyst to connect all the people in Wheaton through inspiring and fostering community involvement, celebrating and educating on our various histories, our culture, our stories, our heritages, and recognize change agents, people making a difference within the community. We have a number of programs that take place throughout the year. Celebration of Black History Month, Veterans Recognition in November, Women's History Month, with I'll make a couple shameless plugs later. Good Citizens Award, which just kicked off our application program yesterday. Make a Difference Day in the fall timeframe, and hopefully we'll have for the third time our annual Festival of Cultures in September 12th. We're pleased to partner with a number and collaborate with a number of groups in the area. Public Library is one of them, the Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Wheaton Association, on and on. Just great people in the DuPage Art League, just great people in this community.
Thank you so much. Dr. Jeff Schuler, can you also tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do here in the district?
Certainly. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for letting me be a part of this discussion tonight. My name is Jeff Schuler. I'm the superintendent for Wheaton Warrenville, District 200. So we proudly educate almost 13,000 students in 21 educational facilities across the communities of Wheaton, Warrenville, Winfield, and Carroll Stream.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll move into our first question. So last summer was a pivotal point. Protests against injustices towards people of color began to rise, and the awareness surrounding discrimination and prejudice heightened. In what ways has your perception and or interaction with people changed? How have you educated yourself about these issues? Mr. Dzugan, we'll begin with you.
Alrighty. I think in terms of the events that took place this past summer, it was reassuring for me, at least, to see the positive way our community responded. Those participating and expressing their thoughts, as well as those that were observing what was taking place. I think everybody was very respectful for the most part of each other's views, and the demonstrations went along in a very peaceful way. Certainly before the events took place, we at the city felt a certain level of concern given what had occurred in Naperville, Aurora, in Chicago. The way that some of those events ended up did put us on edge a little bit as our police department began preparing for the events in Wheaton. But again, I was especially proud of our police department and the way that they went about managing and actually interacting with the participants at the events. In terms of my perceptions or interactions with others changing as a result, I don't believe that I can specifically point to a change, a big change. Perhaps for me, the events added continued motivation for my desire to learn more about the subject of race, diversity, and government relationships, particularly at the local level. How am I educating myself? Well, I call it the 2 L's, basically listening and learning through reading different perspectives from a variety of different authors on subjects of history, race, and particularly biases, which I think is an important discussion that we need to have with this issue. You know, as individuals with complex issues like this, I like to believe we are all on a learning journey. We all come to that journey at different starting points with different perspectives. And I truly believe that movement along the journey line, if you will, happens as a direct result of gaining an understanding of our own experiences and, more importantly, our biases, and how those influence our perspective on a particular issue. You know, I see learning then as the primary tool to move along the journey line. You know, I could provide you later with some of the books that I found very helpful that shaped my thoughts around different views of history, race, stereotypes, and biases.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Would any of the other panelists like to respond to this question? Go ahead.
Well, like I was mentioning prior, I applaud the library for, you know, having this speaking of race series over the last those four episodes. It brought a lot to the table. It educated me in terms of the disparity and I guess this last year, that gap became more and more evident between what I understood, what I knew, and the reality. And so forums like this, there's groups like Better Angels, those that try to bring these hard subjects to the table and have meaningful, open, listening, respecting, honorable dialogue around it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Schuler, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just one thing that I'll add to it. I think Mr. Dzugan really covered a lot of aspects, I think, of how you learn through kind of listening and learning yourself. I've found, or what I've appreciated, is that I think the last 12 months have opened up opportunities for dialogue and opportunities to listen. I think in the school district, something that we continue to find critically important in all aspects of how we improve our operation is that we listen, especially to our students. We empower opportunities for students to engage in the work that we're doing, and I think this has opened some incredible opportunities for us to listen directly to students, to their experiences, their stories in our schools, and I think through that opportunity, we see opportunities to confront and address aspects of our system that may be impeding learning for kids. So I think really just that importance of listening to students and their voices. I knew it, but was certainly reminded of it in the last 12 months as we've listened very intently to our students.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Adamowski.
I also would like to say, for me, the perception was that I realized how much I needed to learn and how much I needed to start grabbing every opportunity that I could to learn more. Listening is always, as we know, something that we could always do better, but always in stepping back and then letting it absorb and then learning from it. But I think the biggest thing that, on top of what our city manager said and Dr. Schuler said and what Tony said, was that what I found, and Courtney can attest to this, is I feel so much more brave to have the conversations now, to do these kind of panels, to do those, book displays, to buy those books or materials that in the past we'd go, oh, we weren't sure, what do we do? And what is that one person gonna say? We can't be always worrying about that one person. And that's definitely something that we learned when we do something. We may get one complaint, but then we get 20 thank yous. And so we're learning to grab that and to grow with it. And so I think that is one big thing that I think the library is we've learned to stop hiding behind it and go to the front of it and be brave.
Thank you so much for that answer. Chief Murphy, would you like to say something?
Yeah, obviously a lot of, when we're talking about last year and the protests and some of these, the vast majority occurred after incidents involving police officers, and people of color. It was an interesting time for us policing, here in Wheaton. I think we had like 6 protests, which is, in my 30 years, obviously was something incredibly new and scary. We weren't quite sure what anything was, how it was going to turn out. And every one of the protests were very peaceful, and people were exercising, their rights. We were mainly there to make sure that they, were able to do that. There was a lot of feelings on both sides of the table on the vast majority of the issues. But I was actually very proud of how the police officers handled it, as well as those that were, exercising their right to protest and to try to bring attention to what is obviously a very important issue.
Right, thank you so much for these wonderful answers. We can move on to the next question now.
All right, so just as many of us are going on our own personal journeys and educating ourselves, it will take the efforts of our entire community to begin creating long-lasting and meaningful change. So how are you working with the community and receiving community input to work together, move forward, and open lines of communication? And where are you at in this process? Mrs. Adamowski, we can begin with you.
Well, following up with what I just said, and what our city manager, Mike Dzugan, said, we are all in different places of where our journey is. And I can speak for libraries on a national level. I almost was, I just looked at awe at some other libraries who were so far ahead to have those conversations, the library is the center of democracy. We are a place for open conversation. The First Amendment is very important to us. The freedom to read, the freedom to view, the freedom to do anything is very important to the libraries. But every community is ready for it in a different way or a different fashion. So when I became the director and I hired Courtney, we would have many conversations about this. How can we get this conversation in front of the community? We knew there were people in the community that wanted to talk about it. We knew there were race issues. There were issues with our Middle Eastern countries. There were issues with our LGBTQ, but we didn't know how and when the city of Wheaton was ready for the conversation. So last year, when all this started to happen, we immediately started to, again, conversing with each other and say, we need to talk about this. And so Courtney, what we ended up doing was we knew we couldn't do it alone. There was no way we could do this alone. So we started to reach out to our partners in community engagement relationships that we have built through the years. And luckily we had those relationships, and they also were like, we're ready too, let's go. And so that's when we started to develop these panels. Of course, COVID, We couldn't do it face to face, so we needed to use a Zoom platform. So we quickly, I think, turned it around. And I think that the Wheaton Public Library is serving as a vehicle for the entire community to have these conversations, to provide places for the community to come to us with questions, with concerns, with suggestions. Just this morning, I got the question, why is this panel so white? And I immediately reached out to that individual. She's probably on the Zoom call right now. And we are going to be meeting for coffee to talk about it, because I want to explain to her, what I'm thinking, and I know she's dying to talk to me about what she's thinking. And I'm gonna, I want to take those conversations and learn from them and grow from them. It's not easy. We did do an LGBTQ display right before COVID started. I'm sorry, it hasn't ended yet. Started, and it was incredible, the amount of people that came through that were disturbed by it. We did the Day of the Dead display. Oh my gosh, that was like, that was crazy. There were so many people who just didn't understand it. So we feel our role is to help our community understand these things. But like I said earlier, we have to be brave to do those displays, to have those conversations. So right now, where we're at in this process is we are, like Mike said, we are in the beginning of this journey. We have a long way to go, but we're starting it. We're going to be brave as community leaders. And I honestly can speak for almost all the community leaders that I work with that are anxious to do this together. We have to do it together. I can't do it by myself, and the police can't do it by themselves. Schools can't do it by themselves. So we're in this together. So I think we've made a great start.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add for this question? Go for it.
Yeah, I'm great to live in a community where the library can bring this to the forefront in public discourse, or at least to be open to the discussion in meaningful ways and honorable ways. Also, about a year or maybe 2 years ago, I forget exactly when, you hosted a show by James Bowie, on When Home Won't Let You Stay, and it's about the plight of refugees. And we had World Relief in our midst here, and it hit home. And his emphasis on building a community of empathy really struck with me and a few other people that were in the audience. And we've been talking with Jim prior to the pandemic to look at ways. He's got a new program going on called We Can Walk Together, and we're trying to figure out ways in which we could embrace that within our own community, and what does that feel like to walk with others in that path. Also, as part of the Festival of Cultures, we had some initial meetings with this group called The Table, and they were representatives of the Latino group, the South Sudanese group, the Ethiopian people, cultures and heritages in our midst, to talk about ways we can share our stories and talk about our cultures and forms to just bring our histories out and celebrations out with the rest of the community, and just celebrate who we are and what we're about.
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Asta. That's awesome and incredible. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add for this question?
Just two things that I'll highlight, and certainly not kind of encompass all that I think is community engagement, but two things in particular. One is that through a couple of advisory committees that we have in the district, we've engaged in the conversation around our equity plan and the efforts that are certainly underway, ongoing within the district. Actually launched a new task force over the summer to study a text as the starting point called Suddenly Diverse, and use that text to examine, to evaluate our own practices, both within the community and certainly within the school district, to continue to drive conversation. And then the third thing that I'll just highlight is within the school district, there's a huge emphasis on homeschool connection, right? Parent guardian school connection. And so our PTA council that kind of serves as an umbrella for that has really expanded or focused their kind of diversity equity initiative to ensure that we've got a representative on each PTA to really ensure that we're reaching families, that we're not only engaging with families, but making sure that they've got a seat in our conversation, a seat in the opportunities to engage in the educational experience. So just three things that I'll highlight.
Real quickly for the city, I know throughout the year, many of our elected officials and staff, dialogued and listened to numerous individuals and groups. I know the police chief and the mayor met with a couple of different individuals and groups, and certainly our social media platforms that we have permitted us to receive a lot of input, and you'd be amazed at the variety of different opinions that come across our desk. And a plug to our boards and commissions. Our boards and commissions are all very, very active. They're made up of a variety of people that are trying to do good work. So through our boards and commissions, we also reach out to the community.
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Dzugan and Dr. Schuler. Would anyone else have anything to add to our second question? If not, then we can move on to our third question.
All right. So in a community filled with residents from all different backgrounds and walks of life like ours, how can we as a community continue to build trust in or with our leaders? This is an open-ended question for anyone. Anyone care to answer? Go ahead.
I'll jump in.
And then Chief Murphy.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike. He outranks me.
Oh, I guess I start, building, I think, trust in many ways is a two-way effort. During the summer, we talked with and listened to, as I had mentioned before, many people about local policing concerns. It was clear to me after meeting and listening to a number of people that many really didn't have an understanding of what takes place here in Wheaton. And some of that is on us as a result of our maybe failure to communicate, what policing means in the city of Wheaton. And as a result of that, realizing that the community didn't really have a good understanding of what we were doing, the police chief penned a letter to the community, I think in sometime around, was it April or May, detailing who we are from a policing perspective. So I thought that was really, really important. I'm going to have a little bit of a sidebar here because I think this conversation is important to have. I find that many of the perceptions that people have about complex issues are really formed by simplified media coverage and talking to one's friends who may or may not really be informed. And for me, and again, this is kind of a sidebar, but most concerning is the information that you find on social media feeds. Many of the feeds, as you know, have content that's sent to you by algorithms that are designed and formed to push out information that fits one's narrative. So when we have important discussions like this, I think it's so important that we understand our biases, right? Our implicit biases and confirmation biases. Where you go out and you get information, a lot of times you're receiving that information that confirms your own bias. So I think those are critical discussions that we need to have. and I know the school district is working on this. They're trying to create what we call critical thinkers, right? That's something that I believe is so important to all of us to move forward, is to be critical thinkers.
Thank you for that answer. Chief Murphy, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'll just jump in from, again, from my perspective. So Mr. Dzugan talked about it in terms of the letter that I wrote last year. Yeah, I had a lot of meetings with residents and groups, a lot of in person, a lot of email exchanges, people of color, underserved, and one of the themes of the letter, stemmed from a lot of these conversations where, again, I don't want to say misinformation or myths, but there's so many differences, when we talk about policing, from both a national level to a state level to, a county level to a local level. And there's all of these nuances and differences. So I spent a lot of time trying to answer how things are in Wheaton, because how things are in Wheaton are not necessarily how they are in, Chicago, or even West Chicago for that matter, to bring it a little closer home. But in having some of these conversations, and I just talked about National Night Out, which we obviously couldn't do last year because of COVID. But I was talking about how we get the officers out there and we're trying to meet with the community, see what needs are, and really establish some of those relationships. And one of the things that came back from a couple different sources was, well, a lot of us wouldn't go to those events. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? Why wouldn't you? And it again wasn't my experience. It wasn't my perceptions or my reality. And it really started the ball rolling and thinking about what have we done to really engage people of color and some of our underserved members of this community, which there are some. And so as we were looking to do our goals and objectives even for this year, so I again, kind of to drill down, I think communication is really a key component of building trust. You have to establish that relationship. You have to be able to communicate with people. So one of the things we're doing, we're kind of taking our roll calls, which is where the officers receive information at the beginning shift, things they're doing, and we're actually going to be taking those out into the community in much smaller satellites, basically in neighborhood roll calls is what we're calling them, where we will be out meeting with the community and actually giving them information on some of the things that are happening in their particular area or citywide, but then also being there to be able to accept not only their complaints or some of the things that are going on in their neighborhoods, but be able to point them in what resources are out there to help them, and try to establish those relationships so that we can keep that going and obviously get information that matters to those people in their realities. So, and I'm, bear with me for just a second. Okay. Sorry if I looked stupid there. I was reading one of the questions in the Q&A. So somebody asked in the Q&A about the makeup of the police department, whether or not it's a diverse police department. The diversity of the police department is actually very similar to the community in terms of makeup. We pretty much reflect the community in terms of races. Gender in relation to policing, the national average is about 10 or 11% females within sworn policing. We're about 22%. We're a little higher on that end. We do see the value in diversity, so we certainly try to embrace it when we can. Hopefully that answers that question that was sitting out there.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to respond to this question as well? Go ahead.
I think there's a couple great stuff. I think a couple other ways that we have been talking about was in having forum for people to tell stories. I don't know if you've ever been to a storytelling event, but you have one person that's speaking from the heart, and no matter what their history is or what their background is, you emotionally track with them, and something within you engages with them, and you develop a connection. And they're doing it with two other people, and I think having forums in which people can share their stories, strengthens connection among us. The other thing is some level of mirroring. We the year before, when we did the Festival of Cultures, we were right behind the mayor's vehicle and stuff, and so it was a Festival of Cultures parade type thing where we had people from the Italians, the Irish, the Sikh group, the South Sudanese, on and on and on. And as you walked and saw the people that are on the sidelines, I mean, the diversity of those that watched, attended the parade was more diverse than I've ever saw before. And just, when the Irish group went by, a group of people would clap, or when the South Sudanese went by, a group of people would clap, and you could just see that, they represent them, and in that representation, that mirroring, you're kind of like acknowledging their presence and their value in the community, I think. So however that plays out, manifests itself, some vehicle, some forums to make that happen.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add? All right, if not, we can move on to our next question.
All right, that was very interesting. So my question is, what are your current plans for adjusting to this new knowledge of diversity, equity, and inclusion to your own work and area and department, around where you do you? Mr. Asta, we'll start with you.
This was a tough one because it kind of hits home. Two of my daughters are Chinese, and one son is Korean, and the situation that's going around the country, right, in terms of violence against Asian Americans and the like, is pretty much hitting home, and we have conversations around it, and around the dinner table. May is Asian American and Pacific Island Heritage Month, and we're in the process of talking to those groups that participated in the Festival of Cultures. The Zealand group here in Naperville represents the Chinese. There was a Korean group. There was a Vietnamese group. There was a Burmese group. We have one of the only Burmese restaurants in our area. We're reaching out to them to say, how can we, in a meaningful way, discuss ways in which Wheaton can, provide forums to listen, to support these communities, and what are they experiencing? How can we support them? Raise awareness of the situation, and talk about ways in which we could address this uptick in violence directed towards those of Asian heritage. There's one thing to celebrate, and you can do that, but you have to acknowledge what's going on. I feel in the back of their minds that they're experiencing and worried about on a day-to-day basis. And there's other groups we're talking about to expand on the dialogue. Like I said, Better Angels. There's a nonviolent communication group. We're kicking off in Oak Park, but and I'd like to stress and emphasize the importance of listening and fostering an empathetic atmosphere. There's also an initiative by the DuPage Presbyterian Universalist church in Naperville called Diversity Dinners, where there's groups of people that meet around the city that 12 whatever people to talk about whatever, and everything's on the table, where you can have these open dialogues in an atmosphere of honoring each other, accepting each other, and respecting each other, but have those hard conversations. Thank you.
All right. Would anyone else like to answer this question?
I'll be happy to chime in. Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you, in the library world, like I said before, we've been, this has been a forefront conversation for us for a long time. But I feel that we are so in the beginning of it, with my new knowledge that has been coming out. So looking at my staff, looking at my library board of trustees, I feel that in my role right now, I have to educate them as much as I possibly can, and provide them with the tools that they need to learn and grow and grasp some of our practices and procedures that we have here in the library. We definitely do and will be looking at our collections. We'll be watching closely to District 200. We'll be watching closely to the state mandates for this types of DEI curriculums. We'll be looking to incorporate even terminology in our HR employee handbook as to how what pronouns we use, looking at our job applications, looking at our job descriptions. I mean, there's so much we have to do. But the first thing, like Tony said, was that we have to have those hard conversations, and we have to bring those together. And so our current plans for adjusting to this knowledge right now is to just get it going. It's not going to happen. We can't go backwards. All we can do is go forward. And our hope is that the community, as well as our staffs, will be patient with this as we move these policy changes and so forth forward, because I definitely think we have some work to do. So, I've been listening to those TED Talks. I've been going to seminars. I've been, reading as much as I can, and just everything. You take one or two pieces of it and you go, aha, you have those aha moments. So, and it's that all we can do is keep going forward.
Yeah, I'd like to add too, and I'm going to compliment Dr. Schuler for their efforts in terms of the proactive practices work plan that you put together. And I think as leaders of our organizations, I think that the key is professional learning, right? I mean, I'm going to read your professional learning, if you don't mind, Dr. Schuler. It says, and I think this is so important, develop staff awareness and knowledge of how one's implicit biases influence behaviors and actions. I really think before you have to have discussions like these critical discussions, you have to understand your biases. So as leaders of our organizations, I think it's on us through professional development to begin that discussions. And I know I have begun that. I've done it a couple of years ago. Betsy might remember, we read the book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman. It's a really great book about, how biases influence not only DEI issues, but also decision making.
All right. Anyone else? Would you like to answer the question? If not, we can move on to the next question.
Perfect. So we've kind of already started to touch on this a little bit, but as we look to the future of each of your departments, what are some of your goals for 2021 from a DEI perspective? Where do you see your department, school district, commission, and the greater Wheaton community a year from now? And what are your goals, policy changes, or efforts in the community? And then Dr. Schuler, we can begin with you.
Yeah, sure. And, Mr. Dzugan actually kind of started the conversation by really referencing our work plan. So I want to mention just big picture, right? The last 12 months have been incredibly disruptive from a traditional educational sense. When the pandemic started and when school, as kind of everybody knew school, got disrupted, we spent a lot of time immediately turning our attention to making sure that students had access to resources, access to learning, access to basic needs like food and the tools that they needed to engage. But as we moved on from that and obviously moved into this year, and we've been through a number of different iterations of our learning plans through this year, there is one district initiative that has not stopped. There were a lot of work plans in progress that we put a halt to, or we put a hold on. The one that we did not was our proactive practices, our equity plan and work. And really there are 6 facets to it. And I'm just going to highlight them quickly because I could take a lot of time to go through all of it. And I know we don't have that time, but really the 6 hallmarks of our work this year. 1, start in professional learning. As Mr. Dzugan mentioned, really focusing on building capacity, understanding, certainly in our leaders, and carrying that work to our staff in our buildings, understanding bias, understanding microaggression, understanding really critical concepts that impact our students' ability to learn and connect to the learning environment. Second is really a lot of work in the area of restorative practices. So we took a hard look at our discipline data, recognized the disparities that we saw in our data in terms of the students that were more regularly receiving out of school consequences, and put an immediate focus on restorative practices, alternatives to some of our traditional disciplinary practices, added actually some staff in the emotional wellness realm to help us actually navigate through that work, providing some alternatives to suspension that again really focused on kind of root cause, and a lot of times that root cause sits with us as staff and adults, not necessarily with our students. Third was focusing on curriculum and programming. So I think just on a at a good starting point, right? We use an incredible amount of literature within the school district, and we did an audit of that literature this year and really looked through this concept of windows and mirrors. As students look at the books that we use in our classrooms, what do they see? They oftentimes see a disproportionate number of those resources that are written by authors or have main characters that don't look like them, don't reflect them. And so we tackled that work this year. Just at our last board meeting, put on display a new bank of resources within the school district addressing that very specifically. Second area within curriculum programming is we actually did look at our bilingual programming for the upcoming year, and at our next board meeting are going to be bringing a foreign language exploratory program that not only addresses the needs of our bilingual learners, but broadens that experience to all students at a couple of our elementary schools in particular. And then the last 3 areas that I'll mention, 1, social emotional learning, critically important. We need to make sure we have relationships with all of our students, that our students have relationships with the school environment. And so we've put a heavy focus on that area, put a heavy focus on our hiring practices. Our staff. The demographic of our staff population does not match our student population, and we're working to address that both in the immediate, but working on addressing it in the long term by actually building a pipeline to get some of our proud. We've got 3 amazing District 200 students that I'm sure have really ambitious plans, but I hope you'll consider becoming a teacher and coming back to engage with us as a teacher. We see that actually as a critical strategy in the long term as we address diversity within our workforce, to really start with our own student population and see that pipeline into to the education pathway, and then finally that focus on family and community engagement. I highlighted the task force earlier, and we hope that's the start of a continued dialogue. So those are really kind of the 6 pillars of our work this year, and I hope. I think the end of your question is, where do we want to be at some point in the future? I anticipate that we'll see growth in all of those areas. I think those are all measurable areas, either in work tasks that get completed and or the data elements that sit behind them, and we're going to continue to work tirelessly toward them.
Thank you for sharing all of those initiatives, Dr. Schuler. That sounds incredible. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to this question?
I guess I'll add where the city is. We just finalized our strategic plan in February. That strategic plan carries us from 2021 through 2025. One of the strategic priorities that's relevant to our discussion tonight was our strategic priority number 4, which is community safety. And we've had goals underneath each of those priorities, and goal B actually provides that the city services match community needs. There's 2 initiatives under that goal. They are to strengthen strategies that lead to, I think, practices to support a wide range of needs of all of our residents. And then secondly, identify social service gaps and needs within our diverse population. I think diversity and inclusion works within that framework of that goal, as we are expected to deliver superior programs and services, again, I emphasize, to all of our residents. I think that's important to point out, and the council did spend a lot of time talking about the broadness of all. All includes race, ethnicity, gender, age, disabilities, education, religion, social class. I think some people refer to that as the layers of diversity, right? And I think that's what the council was trying to get after when they developed those initiatives. I want to give you a quick example of actually how that would work for the city. We actually identified a couple of weeks ago a gap in providing vaccines within our community. Now, obviously, the county is primarily responsible for distributing those vaccines, but we identified a gap in our senior group that does not have access to their own transportation. And let's face it, technologically challenged in many ways. So we had some police officers using our database for Dial-A-Ride. Dial-A-Ride is a program that we offer that provides transportation for seniors who can't drive. So what a great database to go to see if we can identify seniors that can't get to the county or can't get to a facility to get their vaccine. So our officers reached out to that group. We identified actually 50 seniors through the Dial-A-Ride program that weren't signed up. So we're going to help them get signed up. And if necessary, we are going to drive them in a squad car to get up and get their vaccine. So I think that's a great example of what that goal means. It's identifying a gap and providing services to all of our residents. And certainly that senior, that aged group is a group that we needed to attend to. And in many instances, they are also lower income. So it gives you an idea of what the strategic priority for the city is and how it would fit into that diversity inclusion framework.
I can speak on behalf of the Wheaton Public Library in the same way. We will be adopting our 2021-2023 strategic plan next month. And we worked very hard together as a team and along with our board of trustees to develop a much more broader strategic plan. So our first strategic priority is enhanced library user experience, and our goal D, so if you're looking at it and when it gets on the website, is to develop strategies to foster, cultivate, and preserve culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I noticed one of the questions on the chat, somebody asked about diverse in our programming for children. And so we will be developing a DEI programming plan for the year, trying to make sure that we capture as many cultures as we can throughout the year. So it's not only Black History Month. You know, we want to make sure that we also look at everything and all community and all groups, because I think that will build the trust within our community if we recognize as many groups as we possibly can. We will also be developing a DEI collection development plan, looking at our collection to make sure that it is historically correct. Like I said, we can't go backwards, we can go forwards, and we can start adding those books and as we need them, as the community wants them into our collections, and also remove those that are very grossly historically incorrect. And we have done that in the last 7 years. We've removed about 40% of our collection. And those books were books that were retarded, would be in the title. We knew that was not appropriate, and different derogatory terminology that we knew was no longer accepted in our culture. We removed those books. So we are now going to be replacing and looking at how we're going to do our collections. So again, we hope that the community will have patience with us as we do this and move these things forward. And as I said too, our policies and rules of conduct. The city of Wheaton has hired a social worker, so we are going to be working very closely with the social worker and to how better to train our staff on handling some of the different needs that we have within our populations. So it's going to be a long journey, but we have a good start.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that, Mrs. Adamowski, and also Mr. Dzugan from before. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to this last question? If not, then we can move on to our last and final question of the night.
Thank you all so much for your input. We are drawing to the end of our program tonight. These are really difficult conversations to have, but so vital and important. So we really appreciate all of your openness. But I would like to address the fact that there have been comments about the lack of diversity among our leadership in our community. So I'd like to ask the panel, how can we uplift and encourage more diverse community members to become leaders? Would anyone like to address that?
I can say that we in the library profession, we are working very hard with scholarship offerings. We looking at our curriculums in our four-year colleges. You need a master's degree to be a librarian, believe it or not. But we're looking at that. We're looking at the training. We're looking at how what we can relax, what we can't relax, and we're looking at how we can see more diversity within our association, within our association committee work and panels and so forth. So I think as far as the library goes, I'm hoping and praying that we will see more diversity in the profession as they graduate out of these universities. So you have some good candidates to hire from.
Courtney, just two things that I guess we'll add on to that. One, obviously our focus in terms of looking at diversity toward hiring does apply to certainly our leadership positions as well, and we have been cognizant of that. Again, in the school district, we have about 55 administrators. As you look at principals, assistant principals, kind of all of the individuals that function within leadership positions. So that commitment does certainly apply to our leadership positions as well. But I think even more important, what I heard in a lot of the conversation tonight was the importance of dialogue and listening. I think all of us that operate in any kind of leadership position don't do this work in a silo. We rely on community supports and groups that engage with us and helping us to analyze and look at the decisions that we're making. So one opportunity in particular, the Citizens Advisory Committee within District 200, every year, opportunity for individuals in the community to be a part of important conversation that impacts our work. And I would strongly encourage members of our community to be a part of those opportunities, to be a part of the engagement opportunities that exist, that certainly give a voice to our community and key decisions.
Yeah, I guess I would echo that. I think there's opportunities for people to get involved in a variety of different ways. I'm going to again plug Tony's commission, the Community Relations Commission. There's opportunities out there, and we would really love to have people come forward. We have a hard time filling a lot of our commission and board seats, so I think there's opportunities for people to get involved, and I really encourage people to just do it.
I'll echo what Mike said. We have an opening for one. We're a volunteer organization. We have an opening for one, but every first Wednesday of the month, we have a meeting. It's an open meeting where the public's invited to be able to come in and hear what's going on with the commission, some of the plans and activities, as well as share any thoughts or ideas to help us shape the programming. So we're strongly, if you go to the city website, it'll have the information about our next meeting, hopefully soon. Thank you.
Anyone else want to address that question? Okay, I want to, address a couple questions from the audience that have been coming in. If we don't get to your question, we will be saving these and get them to our panelists. But we do have a question for Chief Murphy. What programs or trainings have been put in place to enhance the sensitivity of officers to groups who are frequently marginalized and to make connections to them, or any anti-racism programs?
Excuse me. We actually have pretty robust training in regards to procedural justice, as well as, biased policing. State mandates require, some of it, but we go above and beyond mandates. We also keep those conversations active on a daily basis with the officers. It only takes, a moment in very tense situations for things like this to have a huge and life-altering impact. So we do try to keep those, not just the training, but those conversations, which obviously sometimes are uncomfortable, but we try to do it above and beyond.
Okay, thank you. Another question we had At the end of this, I'd like to know how we as community, as members of the community, can both support our leaders in these endeavors and also hold them accountable. So how can the community support you but also hold you accountable? And this can be to anyone.
Well, I guess I'll start. I think for me, the community can certainly help by, I can only speak for the library, but letting us know what their needs are. If they're not finding something, what is that? And we can start addressing it. And also, I'm going to ask again. Somebody else said, "What's the timeline?" What are you? I know I saw that in the question. What's your timeline to do this audit? We haven't even planned it yet. It's a new thing in the library world. We don't even know how to do an audit for something like this. Our experts are coming together to form those studies and so forth. So it's going to take time. And so I asked the community to be patient with us. It took us this long to get to this point. Let us that time to unravel it and to start addressing it. But I think I will be seeking the community's constructive input to helping me to see where our holes are in our programming or in our collections or in our services, so that we can see them more clear and start adapting them and working through each one. But it's not going to happen in the next 2 months. It's not going to happen in the next 2 years. This is a 10, 15-year plan. So it's something we can start, and the next leadership of this library can take it on and continue with it. So I ask the community for your patience as we move this forward and learn along with each other.
I guess directly to the question, I'm going to go back to my 2 L's. I think the community can support our leaders by speaking to us, so we're listening. So it's important that we hear from the community and we listen, and then secondly, help us learn. If there's areas that you think are important, send us an article, suggest a book to read. I think that's how you can help us, is to become part of the 2 L's, the listening and the learning. And for us, it's the listening. I think the community needs to speak to us, and we've all mentioned how important that dialogue is having. An event like this helps. I mean, that's part of it.
Courtney, I'll jump in really quick. Very much kind of to Mr. Dzugan's point. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we put out our annual report. It's only the second time that we've done it. So the 2019 report and the 2020 report, I mean, there's all kinds of information in there. It's 61 pages, so sit down in a comfortable chair when you go to read it. But it provides as much information that we thought would be relevant, whether it looks good or it doesn't look good. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible and give as many answers as we can. But we certainly we don't know all the questions. So to Betsy's point and Mr. Dzugan's, as much feedback from the community as possible is always going to be helpful in trying to figure out where do we need to go.
Okay, if no one else wanted to jump in, I think we have time for one more question before we end tonight. And this question would be for Dr. Schuler. Can you expound on the discipline disparities within the school district, and do you have any statistics that you can share?
Yeah, I saw that come into the chat, and I don't want to misquote statistics. What I will tell you in terms of the discipline disproportionality. So on a positive note, overall, our exclusionary discipline incidents or situations that encompassing students who are suspended or expelled overall are actually very low within the school district relative to to, I think, almost any other school district our size overall. They're low, but then when you look at the composition of students that are represented in that data, disproportionately, our students of color are suspended at higher levels. Again, I do have that data. Obviously, we've studied it deeply with all of our teams in building the restorative practice work. Again, I mentioned at middle and high school this year, we've actually built a program focused specifically on restorative practices as an alternative to that. But the core of the issue is that our students of color are suspended at much higher rates than our white students.
Okay, thank you. Before we close out, I wanted to hear some final remarks from our wonderful, wonderful student moderators. Any final thoughts? We can start with Jonathan.
Well, yeah, this conversation was like very, very thoughtful. Everybody says very amazing things. I don't necessarily know how to put it into words, but we all put thought into this. And a couple of things I learned is that we all put thought into this. We all put thought into our jobs, and yeah, we all care about each other, but sometimes we don't see it. But we know it. We know it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Next, Maryam, did you want to say a few words?
Yeah, so I just also wanted to say thank you for all the panelists for being here today and like sharing all of your responses with us, because I know it's like not easy to be vulnerable in front of like our entire community. So like a huge thank you for all of you for doing that. And I know that I've personally learned a lot about like everything going on in our community, and like I'm really excited to see the direction that things are going. So thank you for having me be a part of this as well. I just really appreciated being here tonight and seeing all the great things that Wheaton has in store.
Thanks so much, Maryam. Morayo?
Yeah, just echoing the sentiments of our last two moderators. I'm really grateful to be part of this conversation. It was really wonderful and super insightful. And I think I can speak on behalf of the other moderators when I say that this was a really great experience. And I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you to the library for hosting a space for all of us to learn more about what our community leaders did for us.
Absolutely. Like I said, check our online calendar for more DEI programming. Like Betsy said, we are including that in our strategic plan, so there is more to come. Thank you so much to our community leaders on our panel tonight for having this conversation. Thank you so much to our wonderful student moderators who did such a fantastic job. And thank you to all of you for joining us tonight and having this conversation. Thank you. Have a wonderful night. Good night.